The wedding photographer noticed something wrong with the gift table. One package was vibrating slightly and had no card attached. As 200 guests celebrated the happiest day of the couple's lives, he quietly reached for the phone he hadn't used in 15 years. What the bride and groom didn't know was that their photographer had spent 12 years defusing bombs in Iraq before picking up a camera. Welcome to Real Security Stories, where we uncover the moments when hidden heroes step forward when it matters most. Before we dive into this incredible story of quick thinking and quiet courage, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe that sometimes the most unlikely people become our guardians, hit that subscribe button. These stories deserve to be told. Marcus Chen adjusted his camera lens for the 1000th time that afternoon, capturing the golden hour light streaming through the crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom at Riverside Manor. The bride, Sarah Matthews, was radiant in her flowing white gown, while groom David Rodriguez couldn't stop smiling as they moved through their reception, greeting the 200 guests who had gathered to celebrate their union. To everyone in that room, Marcus was simply the wedding photographer, the quiet professional who moved seamlessly through the crowd, capturing moments of joy, laughter, and love. His portfolio was filled with beautiful weddings, and his gentle demeanor made nervous brides feel at ease. What none of them knew was that before Marcus had learned to capture life's most precious moments, he had spent 12 years preventing those moments from being destroyed forever. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, 1st Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit, had served 3 tours in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan. For over a decade, his hands had been steady over improvised explosive devices, car bombs, and suicide vests. He had defused over 300 explosive devices during his military career, each one a puzzle where failure meant death, not just for him, but for countless innocent people. The transition from bomb disposal to wedding photography hadn't been easy. When Marcus returned home in 2015, his hands shook for months, not from fear but from the sudden absence of adrenaline that had sustained him through years of life-or-death decisions. Photography had become his therapy, a way to focus on creating beauty instead of preventing destruction. But some skills, once learned, never truly leave you. The Matthews-Rodriguez wedding was shaping up to be one of Marcus's finest works. The venue was spectacular, a historic manor house, with manicured gardens and a ballroom that seemed designed for fairy tale endings. Sarah had hired him 8 months ago, and they had spent countless hours planning every shot, every angle, every moment that would become part of their family's legacy. Marcus moved through the reception with practiced ease, his camera capturing the natural flow of celebration. Grandparents dancing with grandchildren, college friends catching up over dinner, the quiet moments between the bride and groom when they thought no one was looking. This was why he had chosen this profession: to preserve joy, to create lasting memories of love in its purest form. The gift table was positioned near the entrance to the ballroom. Elegant display of wrapped presents in every size and color imaginable. Marcus had photographed it earlier, part of his standard reception coverage. The table was beautifully arranged, with the card box positioned at the center, and gifts arranged by size to create an aesthetically pleasing display. As the reception moved toward the traditional gift opening ceremony, Marcus positioned himself for the perfect angle. The bride and groom would sit in the 2 ornate chairs that had been placed beside the table, and Sarah would open each gift while David read the accompanying cards. It was a moment that required careful photography, capturing not just the couple's reactions, but the joy of the gift givers watching from the crowd. That's when Marcus noticed it. Among the carefully arranged presents, one package stood out for all the wrong reasons. It was a medium-sized box, wrapped in plain brown paper with no decorative ribbon or bow. While every other gift had been placed with care, this one sat slightly askew, as if it had been positioned hastily. Most concerning of all, it was vibrating. Not obviously, just a subtle movement that someone would only notice if they were looking for it. Marcus had learned in Iraq that explosives often had timing mechanisms that created barely perceptible vibrations. Car bombs, building demolitions, suicide vests, they all had their tells if you knew what to look for. Marcus's military training kicked in immediately. His breathing slowed, his vision focused, and his mind began running through threat assessment protocols he hadn't used in 8 years. The package was approximately 8 inches by 6 inches by 4 inches, large enough to contain a significant amount of explosive material. The vibration pattern was regular, suggesting an electronic timer rather than a cell phone trigger. But Marcus was no longer Staff Sergeant Chen. He was a wedding photographer at the happiest day of two people's lives, surrounded by 200 guests, who had no idea that their celebration might be about to turn into a tragedy. The bride was approaching the gift table, her face glowing with anticipation. David was carrying the card box, ready to begin the ceremony that would cap off their perfect day. Guests were gathering around, phones out to capture the moment, children pushing forward to get a better view. Marcus had perhaps 90 seconds before Sarah would reach for that package. Marcus's first instinct was to shout, to clear the room, to treat this like the combat situation his training told him it might be. But 8 years of wedding photography had taught him something else: how to manage crowds, how to redirect attention, how to solve problems without creating panic. He slipped his camera into his bag and pulled out his phone, scrolling to a contact he hadn't called in 3 years. Detective Amy Walsh, Baltimore PD Bomb Squad. They had worked together on several cases when Marcus first returned to civilian life, providing consultation on military-style explosive devices. "Amy, this is Marcus Chen," he said quietly, stepping away from the crowd. "I'm at a wedding at Riverside Manor on Elm Street. I have a potential device on the gift table. I need you to patch me through to the local bomb squad, but I need them to approach without sirens or obvious response." "Marcus?" Amy's voice was sharp with concern. "Are you sure? Timing device, regular vibrations, no identification. I'm sure. Stay on the line. I'm coordinating with Montgomery County now. How many people?" 200 guests, plus staff. I need to clear the area without causing panic." Marcus watched as Sarah reached the gift table, her hands hovering over the packages. David was positioning the card box, completely oblivious to the potential danger 3 feet away. The wedding videographer was setting up his equipment, and elderly relatives were settling into chairs for the best view of the gift opening. "Marcus, Montgomery County Bomb Squad is 15 minutes out. Can you isolate the package?" "Working on it." Marcus approached the gift table with the same calm confidence he had carried through hundreds of bomb disposal operations. His hands didn't shake, his breathing remained steady, and his mind was completely focused on the task at hand. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying the professional authority that had once commanded respect in combat zones. "I need you to step back from the table for a moment. I want to get a wide shot of all the gifts before you start opening them." Sarah looked confused but complied. "Oh, of course. I didn't even think about that." Marcus began positioning people away from the gift table, using his photographer's authority to reorganize the crowd. "Let's create some space here so everyone can see. David, could you stand over there? Grandparents, let's get you in the front row here, away from the table." To the guests it looked like a photographer arranging the perfect shot. Only Marcus knew he was creating a blast radius. As Marcus worked to clear the area around the gift table, he kept one eye on the suspicious package. The vibrations were becoming more regular, more pronounced. His military training told him that meant the device was approaching activation. Whatever timer mechanism was inside was building toward its conclusion. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, raising his voice to address the entire reception. "Before we begin the gift opening ceremony, I'd like to get some beautiful wide shots of the entire celebration. Could everyone please move toward the dance floor for just a moment?" The crowd began to shift, chatting and laughing as they repositioned themselves. Marcus had managed to create a 40-foot buffer zone around the gift table, but he was still concerned about the size of the crowd and the glass windows surrounding the ballroom. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Walsh. "Bomb Squad 8 minutes out." "Stat in," Marcus quickly typed back. "Device activity increasing. Cleared immediate area. May need full evacuation." That's when he heard it. A soft beeping sound coming from the gift table. The timer had entered its final phase. Marcus's military training took over completely. In Iraq, he had defused devices with seconds to spare while under enemy fire. He had talked nervous soldiers through evacuation procedures in buildings rigged with explosives. He had made split-second decisions that saved hundreds of lives. But this was different. This was a wedding, The beeping was getting faster, more insistent. Marcus estimated he had perhaps 2 minutes before the device detonated. The bomb squad was still 6 minutes away. Even if he could evacuate the ballroom, the explosion would likely bring down parts of the building, potentially injuring or killing guests in adjacent room. Marcus looked at Sarah and David, who were standing with their families, confused but trusting. He looked at the elderly grandparents who had traveled across the country to be here. He looked at the children who were playing at the edge of the dance floor, completely unaware of the danger. There was only one choice. Marcus approached the gift table with the same calm precision he had brought to every bomb disposal operation in his military career. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled, his mind focused on the task at hand. He had done this hundreds of times before, but never in a tuxedo, never surrounded by celebration, never while trying to protect the happiest day of 2 people's lives. "Marcus?" Sarah's voice was uncertain. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Marcus replied, his voice carrying complete confidence. "I just need to check something with the lighting." He knelt beside the gift table, his trained eye examining the suspicious package. The brown paper wrapping was thin enough that he could see the outline of the device underneath, a rectangular shape with wires visible through the paper. The beeping was coming from an electronic timer attached to what appeared to be a significant amount of explosive material. Marcus reached into his camera bag and pulled out a small toolkit he had carried for 8 years, but never used. Old habits from his military days, he never traveled anywhere without basic tools for electronics work. Working with movements so small they were barely visible, Marcus began to examine the device through the paper wrapping. The timer was commercial grade, probably purchased online. The explosive material appeared to be military grade, suggesting whoever had built this device had serious knowledge and resources. But Marcus had defused devices just like this one dozens of times in Iraq. The beeping was now rapid. Marcus estimated he had less than 30 seconds before detonation. The bomb squad was still 4 minutes away. There was no time for evacuation, no time for backup, no time for anything except the skills he had spent 12 years perfecting. Marcus made a decision that would have been impossible for anyone else in that room. Working through the paper wrapping, he located the timer mechanism and began to trace the wires leading to the explosive material. His fingers moved with the precision of a surgeon, guided by muscle memory and years of experience. The crowd behind him was growing restless. Some guests were beginning to notice that something was wrong. Children were starting to cry, sensing the tension from the adults around them. "Marcus," Detective Walsh's voice came through his phone, which he had set to speaker. "Status report." "I'm on the device," Marcus replied quietly. 30 seconds to detonation. "I'm going to try to disarm it." "Marcus, wait for the bomb squad. Don't risk it." Marcus looked back at the 200 people who were depending on him. People who had no idea their lives were hanging in the balance. Sarah and David, starting their new life together. Grandparents who had traveled to see their grandchildren's wedding. Children who had their whole lives ahead of them. "I can't wait," Marcus said. With 15 seconds left on the timer, Marcus located the primary circuit that connected the timing mechanism to the explosive material. Using a small wire cutter from his toolkit, he prepared to make the cut that would either save 200 lives or end his own. The beeping reached a crescendo. Marcus cut the wire. The beeping stopped. For a moment, the ballroom was completely quiet. The device was dead, its timer frozen at 003. Marcus had saved every person in that room with 3 seconds to spare. Marcus stood slowly, his hands steady, his breathing controlled. To the guests, it looked like he had simply finished adjusting his equipment. Only Marcus knew that he had just prevented a tragedy that would have destroyed dozens of families and haunted the community forever. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice carrying the same professional calm it had throughout the crisis. "I need to ask everyone to please exit the ballroom in an orderly fashion. There's been a small technical issue with the venue's electrical system, and we need to have it checked before we continue." The crowd began to move toward the exits, confused but compliant. Marcus watched as the guests filed out, each person a life he had just saved. Sarah and David looked concerned, but trusted his professional judgment. As the last guest left the ballroom, Marcus heard the sound of sirens approaching. The bomb squad was arriving, along with police and emergency medical personnel. The crisis was over, but the investigation was just beginning. Detective Walsh was the first to enter the ballroom, followed by the Montgomery County bomb squad. Marcus stood beside the gift table, his camera bag at his feet, looking like nothing more than a photographer who had finished his job. "Marcus," Detective Walsh said, her voice filled with emotion. "Status: device neutralized, no casualties." The device contained approximately 2 pounds of military-grade explosive material, sufficient to have caused significant casualties and structural damage. The bomb squad commander approached the gift table and examined the device. "This is professional work," he said. "Whoever built this knew what they were doing. How did you identify it?" Marcus looked back toward the exit where the wedding guests were being interviewed by police officers. "I just noticed something that didn't belong." Over the next several hours, the investigation unfolded with the precision of a well-orchestrated operation. The FBI was called in to handle what was clearly a terrorist attack on a civilian target. The device was carefully documented and removed for analysis, and every guest at the wedding was interviewed to determine who might have placed the package on the gift table. Marcus found himself at the center of the investigation, not as a suspect, but as the hero who had prevented a mass casualty event. His military record was reviewed, his actions during the crisis were analyzed, and his decision to defuse the device rather than evacuate was debated by experts. "You saved 200 lives today," FBI Special Agent Rodriguez told Marcus during his debriefing. "But you also took an enormous risk. That device could have detonated while you were working on it." Marcus nodded. "I've defused over 300 devices in my military career. I knew the risks, but I also knew that evacuation wasn't possible in the time available. Sometimes you have to trust your training." The investigation revealed that the device had been placed on the gift table by a catering staff member who had been recruited by a domestic terrorist organization. The target wasn't specifically Sarah and David. It was a public gathering of successful, happy people living the American dream. The attack was designed to create fear and destroy the sense of safety that allows communities to celebrate together. But Marcus Chen had made sure that didn't happen. 3 hours after the device was neutralized, Marcus returned to his hotel room and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his tuxedo. For the first time since he had noticed the suspicious package, his hands began to shake slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline finally leaving his system. His phone rang. It was Sarah Matthews. "Marcus," her voice was shaky but determined. "I don't really understand what happened today, but the FBI agent told me that you saved our lives. All of our lives. I'm just glad everyone is safe," Marcus replied. "David and I want to know, would you be willing to finish photographing our wedding? Tomorrow, maybe? We still want to open our gifts, and we still want to celebrate. We just want to do it knowing that someone like you is watching over us." Marcus smiled for the first time in hours. "I'd be honored." The next day, Marcus returned to Riverside Manor. The FBI had cleared the scene, the bomb squad had declared the building safe, and the 200 wedding guests had been invited to return for a continuation celebration. Sarah and David had decided that they wouldn't let terrorists destroy their happiness or their memories. The gift opening ceremony proceeded exactly as planned, with one significant difference. The suspicious package had been replaced with a gift from the Montgomery County bomb squad. A beautiful crystal vase, with an engraved message. "To Sarah and David, may your marriage be filled with joy, and the knowledge that there are people who will always protect what matters most." Marcus photographed every moment of the celebration, capturing not just the joy of the occasion, but the resilience of a community that had faced danger and emerged stronger. His photos from that day would become some of his most treasured work, not because of their technical quality, but because of what they represented. As the evening wound down, Marcus was packing his equipment when Detective Walsh approached him. "You know you're going to be nominated for a Civilian Heroism Award," she said. Marcus shook his head. "I was just doing my job." "Which job? Wedding photographer or bomb disposal expert?" Marcus considered the question. "Both, I guess. My job is to protect the moments that matter most to people. Sometimes that means capturing them with a camera. Sometimes it means making sure they happen at all." In the weeks that followed, Marcus's story became national news. The wedding photographer who had saved 200 lives, became a symbol of the hidden heroes who walk among us. Veterans who had served in combat zones, and then returned home to serve their communities in quieter ways. Marcus received hundreds of requests for interviews, book deals, and movie rights. He turned them all down. Instead, he started a new project, a photography series called Hidden Heroes, documenting veterans who had transitioned from military service to civilian careers where they continued to serve others. His first subject was a former Navy SEAL who had become an elementary school teacher. His second was a retired Army medic, who now worked as a nurse in a children's hospital. His third was a former Air Force pilot who had become a commercial airline captain. Each photograph told a story of service that continued long after the uniform was put away. 3 months later, Marcus delivered the completed wedding album to Sarah and David Rodriguez. The book was a masterpiece of photographic storytelling, capturing not just the events of their wedding day, but the emotions, the relationships, and the love that had filled every moment. The final page of the album contained a photograph that Marcus had taken during the continuation celebration. A wide shot of the entire wedding party and all 200 guests, standing together in the ballroom, smiling and celebrating. At the bottom of the page, Marcus had written a simple inscription: "To Sarah and David, your wedding day reminded me that some things are worth protecting at any cost. Thank you for letting me be part of your story." Marcus' trident right was that their wedding day had reminded him of something else, that his military service hadn't ended when he took off his uniform. It had simply evolved into a different kind of mission, protecting the moments of joy and love that make life worth living. Today, Marcus Chen continues to work as a wedding photographer, but his approach to his craft has changed. Every event he photographs is viewed through the lens of security and protection. Every venue is assessed for potential threats. Every crowd is monitored for unusual behavior. His camera bag still contains his small toolkit, and he still maintains his connections with local law enforcement and bomb disposal units. Because Marcus has learned that once you've spent your life protecting others, you never really stop. The terrorism case from Sarah and David's wedding led to the arrest of a domestic terrorist cell that had been planning attacks on civilian targets across the region. The investigation revealed that Marcus's quick thinking and decisive action had prevented not just one tragedy, but potentially dozens of others. But Marcus doesn't think about that. He thinks about the photographs he took of Sarah and David's first dance, of their grandparents laughing together, of the children playing at the edge of the dance floor. He thinks about the moments of pure joy that he was able to preserve, because he was able to protect them. Marcus's story spread throughout the veteran community, inspiring other former military personnel to share their own experiences of transitioning from combat roles to civilian service. The Hidden Heroes Project grew into a national movement, documenting the ways that veterans continue to serve their communities long after their military service ends. The photographs became the centerpiece of exhibitions in museums and galleries across the country, showing Americans the faces of the men and women who had served in uniform, and then returned home to serve as teachers, nurses, firefighters, police officers, and yes, wedding photographers. Each image told the same story, that true service doesn't end with discharge papers. It continues in the daily choices to protect, to serve, and to make the world a safer place for others. Marcus never sought recognition for what he did that day at Riverside Manor. He simply saw a problem, applied his training, and solved it. But his actions reminded everyone who heard his story that heroes don't always wear uniforms, and that sometimes the person standing next to you has the skills and courage to save your life. As Marcus packed his equipment after another successful wedding, he reflected on the path that had brought him from the bomb-riddled streets of Iraq to the elegant ballrooms where families celebrate their most precious moments. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been worthwhile. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah Rodriguez. "Marcus, we're expecting our first child. Would you be willing to photograph our maternity session? We want you to capture this moment too." Marcus smiled and typed back, "I'd be honored. I'll be there to protect this moment, just like all the others." Because that's what Marcus Chen does. He protects the moments that matter most. Sometimes with a camera, sometimes with wire cutters. Always with the quiet courage of someone who has learned that the most important battles are often the ones nobody sees coming. The wedding photographer who saved 200 lives continues to work, one celebration at a time, one precious moment at a time, always ready to step forward when duty calls. After all, some things are worth protecting at any cost. Sometimes the most extraordinary heroes are the ones who traded their uniforms for ordinary jobs, but never lost their commitment to protecting others. Marcus Chen's story reminds us that courage doesn't retire, it just finds new ways to serve. If this story moved you, subscribe to Real Security Stories for more accounts of hidden heroes who walk among us. And remember, you never know when the person next to you might be the guardian angel you didn't know you needed. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever met a veteran who found a new way to serve? Share their story in the comments below.